Hello everybody, I'm Raphael Perry and it's time for a little more of The Way of the Tiger. Not a normal gameplay episode, but at least one point during Book 6 I was asked to give my thoughts and feedback and opinions on the book at the end. Now, I've voiced a number of those during the playing of the book, and I decided I'd sort of round things up, recall as many of them as I can, and also offer a few other little things that are going to be going forwards of the series. So first of all, the plan, as we do have Book 7 and Book 0, the prequel, the plan is to now play the prequel, Book 0, before going into Book 7, as a kind of interlude or flashback. This option would obviously not have been available originally. In fact, let's go in that direction next. There are, of course, two versions of Book 6. The originally printed version, with its errors and some continuity issues, and the later version, which can be considered an improved or definitive edition, but is in some ways actually harder, which isn't necessarily a bad thing. So, where to begin? Well, I mentioned previously that this book feels like a linking book, like a bridging book, like a midpoint of a trilogy, which always has the risk of becoming purely a point to convey the story from the first part to the third part, and can feel very sort of transitory. A good example of this would actually be the Awakening trilogy for Ravenloft. Back in the day, the first adventure is set in, I want to say, Falkovnia, and the third adventure in the ruins of Darkened, which become Necropolis at the end of the second adventure and beginning of the third adventure. However, the second adventure is so bland that for many years I could remember vaguely the beginning of it and how it ended, but had no idea how it was supposed to get from that beginning to that end. So I did a bit of a deep dive, and it turns out that the way it gets there is through some of the most heavy-handed railroading I've ever seen in an extremely bland and non-memorable manner. Shame. It is definitely the weakest of the three adventures, and that's unfortunate. This could have fallen into a similar trap, and to a certain degree it does, but not entirely. It still has its own strengths and merits. Regardless of which version of the adventure we are playing, it does a very good job of setting the scene, of immersing us in the world of the rift, in the surface of Orb, the world these monsters and creatures live in, the area we are infiltrating in our attempt to save our friend Glaivas the Ranger, who has been abducted. Now, other than us being told he has been captured, he plays no part in the adventure. We do not get to rescue him. We get no evidence further in that he is in there at all, and it could all be a trap to draw us in. And traps are a recurring theme in this adventure. We are being drawn into a spider's web, not by Nulak, the spider goddess herself, but by the Chaos Bringers, who have some kind of plan. And before we get to the Chaos Bringers, and I do want to speak of them, I just want to say briefly about the two versions of the book. there are significant differences, and some of those differences in the later printing significantly improve on the first version. And we know that the publishers did not wish to extend the deal to a 7th book and make it a 7-book series. I don't know at what point the authors learned this. They may have already written a significant amount of book 6. And in some regards, we know that the final book of the Bloodsword trilogy, Bloodsword Quintet, the final book of the Bloodsword series, was not quite right. It was either the final book of the Bloodsword series or this book, and I think it was the last Bloodsword book, where the publishers just published the first draft they were sent, which was a rough draft and not finished, not final, and they just published that. It could have been this book, but I believe it happened to Bloodsword. And the authors weren't happy about it, but there wasn't much they could do about it. They'd sort of sent it in as a, this is a rough draft, can you give some feedback? And we want to do some edits anyway, it's not quite ready, but here you go, look, here's something. And they were like, fine, we're publishing that, just do it, blah, done. It feels like something similar may have happened here as well, but I'm not entirely certain. Now, before Book 7 was even spoke about publicly, and before the Kickstarter campaign, there were apparently rumours that there was always supposed to be a 7th book of the series, and the series had been cut short at 6 books. And this one does certainly end on a cliffhanger. I know there were articles on the internet by fans saying, lots of fans thought it was odd that maybe this was some kind of karmic punishment, some message from the authors saying, look, you've been killing all these people, you're actually a bad guy, and this is the punishment you get for it. You get to be in hell with the Spider Queen, forever crawling towards you with no chance of escape. And finally, we get that chance of escape. We got Book 7, and even a prequel book. Now, the 7th book was written by a fan with some gamebook writing experience, I believe, but the original authors are listed as authors, so it's got 3 authors' names on that book. I don't think their names were listed just out of courtesy or respect. I think they had done some of the work, and looking at Book 7, there are a few points where the tone changes slightly. I can't quite identify where, but points that feel like they were written by a new author, where the difficulty feels a bit extreme, like he's maybe trying to impress the readers of how hard some of the encounters are, and points where it feels more like the older Balance of Power a bit. I'm not going to say, for certain who wrote which sections, but it does feel like more than one author contributed towards that book. And that's okay, right? It's okay. I think his name might be on Book 6, just for the tweaks that were made for some sections, but I don't know, they might have got Mark Smith and Jamie Thomson in to write those after all. I'm pretty sure he wrote all of Book 0, though. Possibly had a few words with the authors about what could be included and say, hey, showed them a rough draft and they might have given a few editing suggestions or whatever, just to make continuity and fit the setting and stuff. Now, back to the Chaos Bringers. They are great returning villains. They really are. They are nasty. You know they're horrible people and they're going to do nasty things to you. But they plan, they operate, and they carry out their plans, right? It's not just a chance encounter when you meet them, like you bump into them, like, oh, who's this? No. it's like in book 2, they will rob you of a prized possession just to draw you into an ambush where they can lock you in a room with them and try to kill you. And they have, I believe, not necessarily one but 2 contingency plans to aid their escape should things go wrong. And these contingency plans don't necessarily seem much like opportunistic decisions, but rather they've decided we're going to get him. We're going to get him. And, you know, you who lock the door behind him, yeah, you just slip out the door, lock the door behind yourself if it all goes rough. You guys, you go down the secret passage there. If you know, they've got plans, right? They know what they're doing. They are organized. They cooperate with each other. And while they do have their differences and, you know, their pride, they'll occasionally have their falling outs. But even so, it won't completely disrupt their ability to act as a group. This is probably because they were originally player characters in the author's role-playing campaign back in the day. Jamie Thomson's character in that campaign was the soldier who gets his head cut off by a commanding officer in the first book, where the man rides up on a horse and slashes his head off. That was his character. Chuchev, Cassandra, and Form are interesting, and they appear in multiple gamebook series. They, of course, appear in The Way of the Tiger. They also appear in Talisman of Death, the one fighting fantasy book set in Orb, written by the same authors. They appear in a gamebook series called Interactive Fiction, I believe. And I think there's another one more recently that they appear in as well. They appear, wasn't there something to do with Falcon Interactive Fiction, or just Falcon? I can't remember. They appeared in as well, and there might be a novel they appear in too. They are characters who roam around from one story to another, but exist in the same world continuously. They have continuity, and the authors know the characters well. They know what they like to do, they know what to do with them. They know how they behave. And yes, they do things that seem random, like killing a priestess and trying to assassinate the man who slew their fellow murderer in self-defense. So they are vindictive, they are motivated by revenge, but they're not driven by hatred to the point where it extinguishes their capability for rational thought. And each have their own abilities. They are well defined, right? Chuchev is the thief. He's the leader of the group. He is very strong, as he can use a bastard sword with significant skill as if it weighs very little. So full-on hand-and-a-half sword, pretty much in one hand. And back in the day, you needed strength 13 or higher to be able to wield such a sword with one hand. So he had good strength. High strength doesn't mean the highest possible. It means high. He is a skilled thief, and a high enough level thief that his attack bonuses, well, including his strength modifier, are similar to a fighter, comparable to a warrior. You go, oh wait, he's actually really good at fighting. He also has a magical cloak of displacement that makes it hard to discern his exact location. His form blurs and shifts slightly, so you can't quite tell where he is. And we all know that's a Displacer Beast cloak, right? It really is. But it's still... You know, his sword isn't magical. He's got his magic cloak. That's it, right? He's also got a certain degree of arrogance or pride, with his hair dyed bright corn yellow. Cassandra is pretty, but doesn't care for her looks. She's pretty, but scruffy. She doesn't care for her armor. She doesn't look after it. She doesn't maintain it. She just wears armor cobbled together, hodgepodge of, scales and metal plates, just scraps she's grabbed together. It often seems rusty or somewhat rust-coloured. And I get the impression, for some reason, that there's a sort of dark russet tone to her hair that goes with that rusty armour, but I can't remember for certain if that's ever called out anywhere. She is arrogant, a warrior, who doesn't look after her armour, so isn't that bothered about her defence. She is nimble and spry, very agile, light on her feet, and wields a magical sword that is cold. Now, this would have been first, maybe second edition, so a magical cold sword would have just been like +1 or +2 or something. The idea of energy damage being added to a weapon to increase its damage didn't come until very late second edition with the first Baldur's Gate computer game, and then became a standard thing in third edition. Even then, it didn't really become a thing outside the computer games, especially Baldur's Gate 1 and 2. Wasn't really in Icewind Dale very much either. Never really made it to tabletop as a thing until third edition came about, where the idea of breaking down different energy types for damage became quite significant, with different forms of damage resistance and damage reduction. And then you could say, like, aha, my sword does 7 points of damage and 2 points of cold damage. Your monster is immune to the 7 points of choppy damage, but the 2 points of cold damage really get to it, so things like that, right? That was not a thing, so describing her magical sword as cold is just a way of describing the fact that it had some form of magical bonus to hit and damage, essentially. Probably not greater than +3, probably just +1 or +2. It's also not necessarily as large as Chuchev's sword, but she is shown holding it with 2 hands in a few illustrations, which is probably purely artistic flair. I also get the feeling maybe, and it's hard to say exactly, I could probably work out their levels based on the spells Thorm casts and his illusions. They might actually be fairly low level, like around level 3, 4, maybe up to 7, something like that. 7's not low, right? This was first edition, where essentially anyone who got past 6th level should probably retire and become an NPC because they were just that powerful. Okay, in first edition, level 6 was the level where your average fighter could stand up in front of a dragon, take the full brunt of the dragon's breath weapon, and still have a few hit points left to turn around to his mates and go, oh, that was silly, wasn't it? He couldn't do it a second time, but he'd have enough health on average dice rolls to take that mighty blast of damage and survive. And while slightly lower level warriors could probably do that as well on really good dice rolls, they didn't have the ability to just fearlessly go, yeah, well, look, I've got the health to take it, so deal with it, Thorm is an illusionist, which means, in old terms, he gets to cast more spells than another magic user of the same level, but from a restricted spell list that is heavily focused on illusions, but not entirely focused on illusions. He is the schemer, the manipulator, the cold-minded one. When the other two lose their tempers, he gets angry a bit, but he's the one who calms them down and says, look, okay, let's just stick with the plan. We can sort this out later. We'll have your little squabble later. Don't do it now. You're disrupting our goals, our attempts, our means. Now, in this adventure, the Chaosbringers first off warn us against... Well, they warn us that Glaivas has been captured, and they warn us that the Spider Queen has placed a deadly trap, which we can avoid and will lead us into their trap, admittedly. But it turns out they were not lying about that deadly trap, so they're aware of the deadly trap and they have utilised the workaround to their advantage. They've also informed us that we must bring the Sceptre with us as ransom. And we do, even though that makes no sense, because we are not coming to ransom Glaivas, we are coming to rescue him, to break him out, which means we should absolutely not bring the Sceptre with us, but for some reason we do. Perhaps on the belief that if we are captured we may be able to bargain and exchange it for him, or something along those lines. Cassandra brings Foxglove with her to the court to try and curry favour with us. It's not entirely certain if Cassandra intends for Foxglove to accompany us into the depths, and that is why she brings us. It's not entirely clear how much they cooperate. It does seem that Foxglove, under certain circumstances when we meet the Chaos Bringers, seems subservient to them if they have been treating her badly and she has been their prisoner the whole time. So it hasn't been full cooperation. Her being their prisoner does seem to be genuine. They have been treating her badly, but if she comes with us, she will... If she has enchanted us, she will attempt to ingratiate herself with them and demand we give them the Sceptre, and we refuse and swear to protect her with the Sceptre in our possession, and she gets upset by that but goes along with it. Having Foxglove accompany us on the adventure has its upsides and downsides. There are multiple opportunities for her to leave our company. She does at times seem helpful. There are a few occasions when she warns us of great dangers. And there are some times when she goes out of her way to place us in harm's way. For instance, with the Spider Priestess, if Foxglove is with us, she will swoon and faint in terror. When the Spider Priestess instructs us to leave by a specific exit, if we choose not to, Foxglove regains consciousness and pleads us, using mainly her charms and her wiles, to follow the direction as instructed by the Spider Priestess. And if for some reason we decide to fight the Spider Priestess, Foxglove decides to no longer accompany us. This will be important later on. It's worth remembering that Cassandra mentioned that Foxglove has become very popular with the Spider Queen, or the Spider Mother. And while that doesn't particularly come into play in this book here, it does become more of an issue in the next one. Making it through to the end without Foxglove is totally possible, although we have discovered in the old book there is a continuity error where an absent or even dead Foxglove can reappear mid-combat under a very specific circumstance, to be threatened by Cassandra and lead to an auto-kill if you go to rescue her. And interestingly, if you have been charmed by Foxglove, you have no choice but to go and rescue her and walk into her arms for that final embrace as Cassandra stabs you in the back and chops you up into little pieces. From the wording, it does not seem as if Foxglove is terrified and grabs onto you, clinging on for dear life, rendering you incapable of defense, but rather that she actively and intentionally restricts your motions so that you may be slain. This is interesting. I mentioned earlier that Foxglove felt like a bit of a wasted opportunity, narratively speaking. She doesn't feel like a highly detailed and fully realised character. When we first met her in, I believe it was book 4, she was a member of the Church of Nemesis. Not the highest ranking member of the church, but she was a priestess and head of the secret society of spies and informers, who we utilised to help cement our position on the throne. We did this for 2 reasons. Firstly, to have a sort of secret police to protect against spies and assassins, and indeed, she did come in useful in that regard, but also because we had already offended the Temple of Nemesis by defeating the usurper and by essentially banishing the head of the church, who had demanded a place on the High Council and threatened to kill us if he didn't get his way. She had made less threats, but she is still a member of the Church of Nemesis, and they hate us. And there have been times on the road at night when we caught her staring at us very intently when she thought we were asleep. And we do know that if we refuse to give in to her temptations, she can attempt to stab us in the night with a poisoned dagger and leave us for dead. So, we may slay Lady Foxglove near the beginning of the book, when we attempt to go and capture her or Cassandra from the orcs. If we slay Lady Foxglove and don't interact with Cassandra at all, and don't speak to Foxglove or learn from her, we have no idea that Glaivas has been captured and the whole thing gets really nasty, right? It's also possible she may leave us and ride off into the distance when we are on our way to the Rift, or we might have had her executed back in Earthmancast, and even in the Rift, she can leave us when we if we turn against the Spider Priestess. She can be captured by an orc chief and we can hand her over to him to be his slave, and she really doesn't like that, but then she talks him into taking us prisoner and we have to find a way to escape. I don't know if we can rescue her after that or not. She can be absolutely slain by a lightning bolt from Eris the Magician, which means Eris is at least 5th level. So he would have been at least 3rd level a few books ago when he cast the Stinking Cloud spell, and he's done that again here. He probably wants to be careful and not blow his load all in one go. He's probably used a lot of spells. So back in the day, magic users had a very limited spell selection, and they had to be very selective about when these spells were used. Oh wait, what? Oh no, I see, right. I was just looking at something. It would seem that the reason the Chaosbringers want us to bring the Sceptre into the bowels of Orb has nothing to do with Glaivas the Ranger, but rather to do with them obtaining the Sceptre, which they then intend to use to rule the city of Earthmancast in our stead. Something the Temple of Time does not seem to approve of. as the Temple of Time does not seem to have attempted to aid them in this endeavour. However, it would seem there may be some level of cooperation between the Chaosbringers and the Dark Elves, because in Book 7 it does turn out Glaivas has indeed been captured by the Dark Elves, and at one point I think one of the Dark Elves might request the Sceptre from us as a way of rescuing him. We don't have to give it to them, it's just something they ask of us. At one point in Book 7, that same Dark Elf informs us that Book 7 is a cosmic standoff between many of the gods of the world of Orb and their champions. So we have the Dark Elves representing Nulak, the Chaosbringers representing Anakil. We have the adventuring party with Taflur, Eris, the other two. Swordsman's name I think begins with a T, and then the other priest, whose name currently escapes me. One moment. Yes, Tybalt and Taflur are the two priests, and Vespers, the swordsman, whose name does not begin with a T at all. And of course, Eris, the magician. Eris represents Beatan. Taflur and Tybalt are Avatar, the same god that Dore Lejeune worships, and Gauss, the god of arms, as in weapons and armour. Taflur represents... Oh! Okay, so... Vespers is the worshipper of Gauss, the enchanter of arms and armour. Got it, right. Okay. So, the Chaosbringers seem to intend to capture the Sceptre from us and use it for their own ends. Why they lured us to such a deadly location is a little odd. It may be that they've been forced to retreat here, hiding out while they recover from some particular setback or other. I'm not sure that they are hiding from the other adventuring party here, because they are surprised to see them. They don't seem to expect them to be here at all. And there's been enough evidence of their presence that the adventuring party know to seek them here. So they've left a bit of a trail, maybe a few wounded orcs spreading rumours or something. The use of Glaivas the Ranger as a reason to drive the plot forwards at the beginning of the adventure feels as if it was never fully realised upon if this were to remain the final book of the series. It does make a lot more sense in Book 7, where we actually get to try and rescue him. What else, I wonder? Oh, yes. With the 7th book being more of a showdown between champions of the gods, Lady Foxglove is the only surviving champion of Nemesis who is still a part of the story. And as a champion of Nemesis, her behaviour in Book 6 makes a lot more sense. Viewed on its own in Book 6, without the existence of Book 7 being known, her motivation feels weak and inconsistent. But now that we know... Well, We know two things. Firstly, we know that she is driven by a religious indoctrination that has made her morally opposed to us and hate us in many ways. Even if we've been nice to her and kind to her, there's still a deep dislike, which seems to be deeper than it initially appeared. We've also learned that the Spider Queen can use smaller spiders to take people over as puppets and control them against their will. And in the 7th book, there are hints that something like that may have happened to Foxglove. Now, early in book 6, Cassandra does comment on Foxglove having got along very well with the Spider Queen. And in book 7, we can discover Foxglove, and if she died in book 6, we can literally ask her, hey, didn't you die? And she says, yes, when I died, a powerful spell placed on me by the Spider Queen summoned me back here and restored me to life so that I could meet you, essentially. It's like the Spider Queen has drawn her back there to suffer, and yeah, it's it would seem, though, that she plays a deeper role. She appears to be just a throwaway role in book 7 as well, that feels a bit wasted. But it seems that she may be more of a recurring villain and more important in that adventure. There are a number of traps in book 7 that I will look forward to experiencing, which are not traps. For instance, it is possible to give the scepter away to someone who needs a weapon, so they can use it like a mace. That person will use it as a mace and assist you in combat, but will then begin to use the scepter to enforce their will and force you to take certain actions which may not be in your best interest because they are impatient or desperate or think they know what's best. That is essentially a trap. There is another weapon that can be found beforehand and given to this person, but if you don't have it, you have to give them the scepter. So there are traps along those lines. Traps where certain actions may lead to you being severely disadvantaged. There are also early things in book 7 that feel like elements of modern game design that would not necessarily have been done that way if the book had originally been published back in the day after book 6 had been. One more thing I have from the soundtrack, of course, is 2 more soundtracks, which we will use for the episode introductions. We have track 7, Redemption, and track 8, Upanishad. Now, the Upanishads are a series of well, not a series, a group of spiritual writings and teachings from the East. I'm not sure which track is for which book. I feel that Redemption is probably for book 7, with Escaping from the Spider's Web, and Upanishad for the temple where Avenger is being taught in the prequel adventure. But you know what I'm going to do? As a special little treat for this episode, I'm going to play them both and let you guys tell me what you think, right? So, this is track 7, Redemption. So for this track, we've had the tinkling, trembling sounds of spiders skittering or vibrations on a spider's web. We've had a rousing choral feel that reminds me greatly of Act 1, Scene 2 from Akhenaten, the funeral of the previous king. We have the priest speaking here. Philip Glass. It's like seize thou this king by his arm, he goes to the sky. The gates of the heavens are open, the bones of the hellhounds tremble. See now this mortal man, he goes to the sky. It's a great piece. Used in some shit Marvel movie film for some funeral for some dead guys we didn't even know about because they weren't in the fucking film, just in some previous film right at the beginning. And people go, oh wow, it's the film called Watchmen or something, and we know that music. It's like, yeah, you know, because it's a classical piece of music that's far older than that film. It's really brilliant. So that kind of felt like it definitely fitted the theme of redemption and trying to, escaping from the web and trying to rescue Glaivas, find Dore Lejeune, make our way safely out of there. I think this is probably a good... And then it kind of calms down and goes into the Way of the Tiger theme, which I do like the fact that it has reoccurred through every single track in the soundtrack. And now we have the final track, Upanishad, which I think is for the prequel book, but let's give it a listen and see how it feels. Alright, so there we opened with lilting strains that often felt more Middle Eastern than Oriental. And then we moved into the stringed section that felt a little more European, but also a bit a bit Middle Eastern. And then finally, the Way of the Tiger theme came through on more of a woodwind section, and it did seem more in keeping with the opening. We know that Book 0 is about a training exercise in which a number of young monks from the Temple of the Rock participate and what's the word now? Compete with one another to go out into the countryside of the island and attempt to, I think it's recover some sort of sacred banner and bring it back to the monastery before anyone else manages to find it. And there might be a little bit more to it than that. And it leads up towards the beginning of Book 1. But I wouldn't say it goes completely into it necessarily. Musically, I'd say this one was more relaxed and less tense and spiderweb feeling. And it's probably the one for Book 0. But hey, if you think otherwise, I can definitely see how this one could be appropriate for Book 7. I'm not quite so sure on the redemption track being used for Book 0 though, but yeah, you guys let me know your feelings on the two music tracks. Now, what else can I throw in before I wrap this up and go record something else for the night? Now that I have a greater understanding of the fact that the Chaos Bringers and Foxglove, and even the adventuring party who were with us at the end of this book, all play a larger role in Book 7. In terms of some kind of cosmic throwdown between the gods, or rather cosmic showdown. Some of the things they have done in Book 6 to fully wait. I'm just quickly looking at the beginning of Book 7. Section 1 doesn't mention the adventuring party. Section 92 is the next section that might yeah, so the adventuring heroes are mentioned here. So they are pretty much assumed to be with us. It might be possible to make it to the end of Book 6 without them, but they suddenly show up here. And that maybe that's covered more in the introduction. And it might be much harder to make it to the end of the book without them. That is one reason, because I had looked at like the first few sections of the book when I got it. And that is one reason why I wanted to try and make sure the adventuring party were with me at the end of the first book. Additionally, if Foxglove was with us at the end of Book 6, there's a little payoff near the beginning of Book 7. It leads to complications further down the line, but it can be of assistance early on. And it felt like the iconic ending to have everyone fall down into the spider web, screaming as they go. Oh yeah, the world worm or world serpent, right, from Book 6. That feels very rushed. The way that it's hardly really described, suddenly it's here and we don't know how it got here or why it was here. We know that it was dead and turned into some kind of statue, and now that it begins to return to life, it's not really very alive because most of its body is rotted away and, you know, collapsed, and so there's a gaping hole leading down, so rather than going down its gullet, we fall down through the hole in its body into the abyss. I'm not sure how much research the Chaosbringers did into this, but they had planned for this to be their escape route. I'm not sure if they knew that it would descend straight down to the spider's lair. I think they knew where it went. I think they knew they wouldn't just get trapped in its gullet. When the Krafak appears and chases us to it, the Krafak also feels like a bit of a odd moment. It might have been an action sequence to escape from it at one point, but there just weren't enough sections in the book, and it was growing too big, and there was too many duplicate sections already with tracking what was going on the Foxglove and other things like that. And did we have the adventuring party with us? It does feel like this book might have ballooned up slightly beyond the original intended size, given that it actually is 4 sections longer than any other book in the series. This has, of course, been adjusted in the reprinted version, where not only have sections been trimmed and condensed together, but additional sections have been added to include a whole other fight against a Dark Elf on one path, and to extend the fight with the Chaosbringers at the end, which actually is worthwhile because it's possible to get through this book with very minimal combat up to that point. And so, as the combat is rather limited, what combat there is can afford to be rather more dangerous and unforgiving, especially as it's like the last fight of the game, and after that we get a kind of, you know, it doesn't matter as long as you can make it alive to the end. So I'm not sure if at one point the Krafak was going to have, you know, maybe make some attacks against us, maybe the Dark Elves on top would fire some arrows that we'd actually stand a chance of being hit by, and we'd be asked if we have arrow cutting and things like that. Or it might have always just been there to shepherd us on towards the end. But the end does feel rather nasty and pessimistic if we are not aware that there is one more book to follow. It definitely feels like an incomplete story with a, again, if we didn't know about book 7, a very rushed and unsatisfying end. Because the end does not make it clear that, oh, don't worry, there'll be one other adventure with which to complete this. Whereas Bloodsword was the final book, but it was... Also, the last Bloodsword book was written by 3 authors, because Jamie Thomson actually had to come in and finish it off after the other 2 had done some of the work. For some reason, one or both of them couldn't write anymore, and he had to come in and finish it, which is why the tone of that book feels a bit different to the previous 4 books in the series. And the 3 authors who worked on that final book aren't particularly happy with the way it turned out. And that may be the one where the non-final draft was published early, but it might be this one again. I'm not entirely certain. If you know, by the way, if it was this one or the last book of Bloodsword, please let me know in the comments section down below. I swear I know, I just can't remember clearly at the moment, and it is pushing 2 in the morning. Speaking of which, I did say I was going to record something else tonight as well, so there'd be a gameplay video up tomorrow too. And I said it was probably going to be Lost in the Open, as I haven't played that for a few days now, and I want to get back into it. That being said, Steam Next Fest has started, and there are demos for 2 games that I'm very interested in. And I don't know if these are limited time demos, which will go away at the end of the Next Fest, or if they are going to be continually available to me now that they have been released. And those 2 games are Shards of Order, which is something that heavily reminds me of Kingdom Death, and as such I'm going to enjoy that quite a lot, and Norse, Oath of Blood, which looks like a lot of fun, actually. It reminds me of... it's sort of like an adventuring settlement management thing. A little bit like Expeditions Viking, but without the modern slang that made it feel so wrong. And with the sort of sense of humour that is a little wacky, but actually you might find in the old sagas. Although there are a few anachronistic hairstyles that owe more to the Vikings TV series and gangs of bikers than actual historical Vikings. That being said, I want to enjoy both of those, so I'll be recording those sometime soon. I'm going to try to make sure that doesn't delay Lone Wolf Wednesday to be Thursday or something weird. But I definitely want to record both of those two games soon, even though I said I wanted to record Lost in the Open tonight. So I will record Lost in the Open next, and that should be going up, I don't know, an hour or two after this video, essentially. So if you've enjoyed this one, hey, maybe there'll be something else to watch up very soon. Or it's up already. I hope you enjoyed my thoughts on the... Oh God. Oh, the bull-thrush-headed pin. Yes. The bull-thrush-headed pin and the little brain spiders in this book. As I mentioned, if you can get the bull-thrush-headed pin, you basically don't need it. You need to go out of your way to need it. If you get the bull-thrush-headed pin, you need to panic in the chapel and run away from the Dark Elves before they get close enough to recognize you're dressed like one of them and call off the assault. And only then can you meet the spider. So the other time you might need it is if you've met the adventurers and come to... Well, maybe without them you can still come to the Samovar. If you met them, then parted and went your own separate ways, essentially. So you could need the bullthrush-headed pin there. But if you have the bullthrush-headed pin, that means that if you meet the adventurers, Foxglove will die, and she won't be able to help you out at the beginning of Book 7. Churchev's pouch, which we could obtain in combat towards the end of the book, obviously served no purpose in the original Book 6, and does not in the new Book 6. In Book 7, however, it is found to contain a useful item. That being said, Maptools Dice hated me, and if you all tell me I don't deserve it after the way I behaved, maybe you're right. And I could totally play without it and enjoy Book 7 anyway. Oh, okay. I still feel Foxglove got a bit of a raw deal, but understanding the role she seems to play in Book 7, the deal doesn't seem quite so raw. There we are. I hope you've all enjoyed this little chat of an episode, and I'll look forward to seeing you all in the next one, which will be probably in a week or two. Just give me a bit of time to enjoy and focus on other things, and then I'll be getting to Book 0 as Avenger languishes in the web of the Spider Queen Nulak, and in an attempt to meditate and cast his mind back to a place where Quan can make him feel safe and happy, he remembers an earlier adventure. And I hope to see you all there for that one. Goodbye for now, everyone. We're all ninjas.